They stepped out into the daylight, their boots echoing softly against the ground, a sound that had become far too familiar. Their faces were composed, their movements deliberate, but beneath the surface lingered the exhaustion of endless decisions and the uncertainty of what each new day might bring. The war had aged them all, not just in years, but in the quiet heaviness that never left their eyes. Moments like these weren't about command or power, they were about endurance. About learning to move forward even when the world around you felt like it was unraveling. The silence between them spoke louder than any words could, carrying the unspoken truth that every step taken in those times came with a cost. This photograph is a glimpse into that reality, not of battles or victories, but of the people who carried the unseen weight of it all. Beneath the harsh desert sun, he paused for a moment, the weight of command hidden behind a calm expression. The horizon stretched endlessly, quiet yet heavy with unspoken thoughts. In that stillness, he wasn't just a soldier, he was a man reflecting on the cost of every decision, the distance between duty and peace. The sand carried stories of struggle, courage, and survival. Each day demanded strength, not only to fight but to endure, to keep a steady heart when the world around seemed consumed by dust and uncertainty. His gaze wasn't one of pride, but of reflection, a silent question about what all of it truly meant. This photograph reminds us that behind every uniform was a person, weary, thoughtful, and human, standing beneath the same sky we see today, wishing for an end to a war that tested the limits of every soul. The snow crunched beneath their boots as they walked quiet steps through a land frozen by more than just winter. Around them, people moved slowly, carrying on with life as best they could. The world looked calm, but behind that stillness lingered the exhaustion of years spent in conflict, of hearts longing for warmth that no uniform could provide. In the midst of hardship, these men carried themselves with a quiet resolve, not out of pride, but survival. The cold was merciless, yet their determination burned quietly within, keeping them moving forward through uncertainty. It was not victory they sought in that moment, but endurance, the strength to keep going when everything around them had been stripped bare. This image captures more than history, it captures the spirit of endurance, the resilience that emerges when the world feels frozen, and the hope that even the coldest seasons eventually give way to spring. Amid the ruins of a shattered city, they stood in quiet conversation, surrounded by walls that once echoed with life, now reduced to silence and dust. Every brick behind them held a memory, every crack told a story of what war takes away. Their uniforms looked composed, but their eyes carried the exhaustion of witnessing too much. Moments like this show that victory and loss often look the same up close. There's no triumph in broken streets, only lessons about how fragile humanity becomes when destruction overshadows compassion. These men weren't just standing in a city, they were standing in the aftermath of countless untold stories. This photograph reminds us that history isn't only written in battles or dates, it's etched into the ruins, the silence, and the hearts of those who had to walk through it all. Somewhere between missions and miles of open fields, they found a moment to breathe, to share a glance, a faint smile, something that reminded them they were still human beneath the weight of war. The camera caught more than uniforms that day, it captured a fleeting break from the chaos, a rare spark of normalcy in a time when nothing felt certain. Moments like these were fragile and precious, laughter that hid exhaustion, courage that softened into brief friendship. It's in these unscripted seconds that we see the truth of history. Behind every command and every headline were men simply trying to hold on to the little pieces of life that war couldn't take from them. Even in the hardest times, humanity found a way to exist quietly, tenderly, and often, just for a moment. In the stillness of a trench, one man reads a message while another waits quietly beside him, two lives bound by a moment of uncertainty. It could be an order, or a letter from home, but the expression on their faces says everything. Even in war, the simplest words could feel heavier than bullets. There's something haunting about scenes like this, where duty and humanity meet in silence. The paper in his hands might carry hope, loss, or just routine, yet it holds the power to change everything. Behind every battlefield command stood ordinary men doing their best to stay human in a world that kept testing what that meant. This image reminds us that history wasn't just written in strategy and battles, it was written in moments like this, in the quiet exchange between soldiers who carried the weight of tomorrow one message at a time. Two men stood beneath the open sky, their eyes fixed on the horizon as ships rested quietly in the harbor. To the world, it looked like authority. To them, it was another moment of waiting, of wondering what tomorrow would bring. The sun reflected on the water, calm and still, a sharp contrast to the weight in their hearts. In moments like this, silence spoke the loudest. It carried the exhaustion of decisions, the hope that peace might one day rise from the same waters that carried so much loss. Behind the medals and posture were human beings, trying to hold on to a sense of purpose amid the uncertainty that never left their minds. Time may fade uniforms and names, but not the emotions caught in frames like this where pride, fear, and humanity existed together in fragile balance. They stepped out from the shadow of the wooden cabin, their uniforms crisp, their expressions composed. Around them, the quiet hum of the forest whispered through the trees, a strange calm in the middle of a world that had forgotten what peace felt like. Their movements were deliberate, but their eyes carried the unspoken fatigue of men who had seen too much and had no choice but to keep moving forward. It's easy to forget that even in moments like this, behind discipline, behind salutes, there were hearts that longed for normalcy. For a day when footsteps on the ground didn't mean orders, but homecomings. History often remembers the wars, it rarely remembers the silence that followed each one, the pause before the next decision, the human breath behind the uniform. This photograph freezes one of those moments, still, composed, yet deeply human. They stood under an open sky that once meant freedom, now shadowed by duty and uncertainty. The field around them was quiet, but the silence held the weight of decisions too heavy for words. Every glance, every step, carried a story of men shaped by circumstance, walking through history they didn't yet know they were writing. War changes the way people stand, speak, and breathe. It turns ordinary moments, a conversation, a gesture, a look, into echoes that time never forgets. This photograph freezes that fragile balance between command and conscience, between following orders and longing for peace. Looking back, we see not just soldiers, but human beings caught in the tide of something larger than themselves, reminders that the cost of conflict is always measured in hearts, not victories. They stood in formation, their faces set against the weight of duty. To an outside eye, it might look like order, but within that silence was a mix of fear, loyalty, and the hope that somehow, all of it would end soon. Each uniform told a story not of power, but of endurance, of men trying to hold their composure while the world they knew was tearing itself apart. History often shows us moments like these, frozen in time. But behind every salute and every medal were countless emotions left unspoken, friendships, regrets, and dreams interrupted. The camera caught stillness, yet it hides the heartbeat of a world caught between courage and consequence. When we look at these faces today, we remember not the ideologies or battles, but the human cost, the lessons learned too late, and the quiet reminder that peace will always be worth more than pride. He walked between the lines of soldiers not as a symbol of power, but as a man who carried the same weight of fear, loss, and hope that each of them did. His uniform might have set him apart, but his heart beat in rhythm with theirs. Every step he took was a silent promise that their courage, their sacrifice, would never fade into the background of history. The faces around him tell stories words can't capture, of sleepless nights, unspoken prayers, and the quiet bond between those who stood side by side in the face of uncertainty. In that moment, ranks didn't matter, humanity did. This photograph is more than a glimpse of the past, it's a reminder of the strength that rises from unity, the respect earned through empathy, and the hope that even in the darkest chapters, compassion can still walk among soldiers. They stood in perfect lines, but behind every uniform was a heartbeat that trembled with both pride and fear. Young faces, some barely touched by age, looking toward their commander not as an officer, but as a symbol of what they hoped to survive for. The air was filled with silence, the kind that speaks louder than words, the kind that carries the weight of what's to come. Moments like this weren't about glory, they were about unity, about strangers standing shoulder to shoulder, trusting one another with their lives. Each man there carried memories of home tucked deep in his heart, a letter, a promise, a face they prayed to see again. This photograph captures not just soldiers preparing for duty, but souls learning the true cost of courage. It's a reminder that even in formation, humanity still stood quietly behind every salute. He stood in the cold, layered in gear that couldn't shield him from the weight of what he carried inside. The frost bit at his face, yet his eyes stayed steady, not out of defiance, but determination. In every wrinkle of his coat and every mark on his hands, there's a story of endurance, of a man who kept moving forward when the world around him was breaking apart. Leadership in times like these wasn't about commanding, it was about surviving with purpose. The kind of courage that doesn't shout, it breathes quietly through fatigue, through sleepless nights, through the will to protect others even when hope feels thin. This image isn't just about war, it's about resilience. It's a reminder that strength isn't measured by medals or power but by the calm of those who keep standing, even when everything feels lost. There's something hauntingly calm in his expression, the kind of stillness that comes only after walking through storms. His eyes tell a story words can't hold, of responsibility, of choices made under impossible weight, of moments that tested not just courage, but conscience. Behind the decorations lies a man who carried not only duty on his shoulders, but the quiet ache of everything war takes away. This photograph freezes a fragment of time, a rare stillness between chaos and memory. It reminds us that history isn't just written by battles, but by the human hearts that endured them. Every scar, every wrinkle, every steady gaze is a reflection of endurance, of holding oneself together when the world feels like it's falling apart. In the silence of this portrait, there's more than pride, there's reflection, humility, and a faint wish that peace would finally last longer than war ever did. He smiles faintly as he raises his hand, not out of pride, but out of quiet respect. Behind that salute is a story written in exhaustion, loss, and unshakable duty. His expression holds the calm of someone who has seen too much, yet still believes in the value of courage and unity. It's not the medals on his chest that speak loudest, but the gentleness in his eyes, the kind that only those who've carried the weight of war truly understand. This moment captures something beyond victory. It's the grace of survival, the strength of leadership born not from power, but from empathy. It's a reminder that even in the darkest of times, humanity can still shine through discipline, resilience, and a simple act of respect. When he saluted, it wasn't just a gesture to the troops, it was a silent promise that peace, once found, would be cherished. Under the bright sun, conversations like these carried the weight of decisions that could change countless lives. The faces may seem calm, but behind every look was tension, a silent awareness of what was unfolding beyond those walls. History often remembers the battles, but moments like this remind us that wars were also fought in quiet corners, in uncertain words, and in the stillness before storms. Every photograph from that time holds more than uniforms and strategy. It carries the fragile thread of humanity trying to survive within chaos. Behind each discussion stood people longing for peace, for home, for something normal to return. Even in power and planning, there was fear, a truth that no side could escape. When we look back now, we don't see just soldiers or officers, we see humans caught in history's shadow, proof that even those who seemed unshaken were just trying to hold themselves together in a world that had forgotten calm. He sat in the quiet, holding a small note in his hand, maybe a message from home, maybe orders from the front. In that moment, the world around him felt still, as if even the wind refused to interrupt his thoughts. Behind the uniform was a man carrying the weight of choices, fear, and memories that words could never capture. War has a way of aging faces too soon, of turning moments of reflection into silent prayers. He wasn't thinking of victory or defeat, just of surviving long enough to see peace again, to remember what laughter once felt like. Every soldier had their own story, and most of them were written not in glory, but in quiet heartbreak and longing for normal days that never came back. This image doesn't glorify the past, it reminds us that every side of history carried hearts that bled the same. That behind every decision, there were lives trying to hold on to hope in a world that had forgotten how to be gentle. A moment of command and intensity on a battlefield, likely from a mid-20th century conflict. 3 uniformed officers stand atop a military vehicle under a bright, harsh sky. One raises a document high into the air, a gesture that radiates determination and urgency, perhaps signaling orders or victory. Another man beside him gestures outward, pointing toward the horizon as if directing advancing troops or coordinating a movement, while a third steadies himself, observing through binoculars. The scene feels alive with purpose, dust, heat, and tension surrounding the figures. It's a rare frozen instant of leadership in motion, when the chaos of war briefly organizes itself into focus and command. In the cold silence of the front, these men stand together, faces set, eyes searching the horizon. Their coats carry the dust of long days and sleepless nights, their expressions marked by the weight of command and uncertainty. Between them lies an unspoken understanding that history is not written in comfort, but in moments like this. This photograph captures the stillness before action, a rare pause in a world consumed by chaos. It reminds us that even in war, there were moments of reflection, where leadership meant not just giving orders, but carrying the burden of every life that followed. In the shadows of the 20th century, the world faced one of its darkest chapters. Behind formal handshakes and military uniforms lay decisions that would reshape the course of humanity forever. Millions of lives were caught in a storm that began with ambition and ended in unimaginable loss. Every photograph from that era tells a story not of power, but of how fragile peace can be when it's taken for granted. The faces we see remind us of choices made in boardrooms, battlefields, and bunkers that echoed for generations. History has taught us that even the smallest act of division can grow into something that tears the world apart. What matters most is how we remember and what we choose to learn from the silence of those who never returned home. May we never forget the value of unity, the cost of war, and the importance of compassion. Because remembering isn't about reliving the pain, it's about making sure it never happens again.